So here's the funny thing. This is a page, or a YouTube channel, I should say, that is about the Caribbean. But my most popular video happens to be a video about God. Interesting, isn't it? So first of all, I want to apologize for not keeping up with my channel for a few months now. It's been quite some time that I've actually put up any content. Want to apologize for those of you who were looking for me to put something up. Part of the reason why that has been the case, or that was the case, was because I was planning a move to a different location. So I have moved to another state. I'm no longer up north. And then my wife started working again. And now I am the one that's primarily taking care of a 3-year-old toddler. Now, he turned 3 since the last time I did a video, or I uploaded a video. And he's a handful. So it's been pretty hard for me to go ahead and do any kind of YouTube videos. As a matter of fact, he's sleeping right now. And I'm hoping I can get this video in before he actually wakes up and comes down here to terrorize me. He's a treat though. But here I am, back to do another video. And while I know this page is about, supposedly supposed to be about the Caribbean, or things somewhat connected to the Caribbean, this video is going to be about my most popular video, and boy is it controversial, because it's a topic that lots of people talk about, lots of people are concerned about, lots of people talk about just every day. It's a very, very popular topic beyond, besides something like politics. And it was a topic about God. Well, anyway, that video I put up back on March 9th, 2018. And if you're on my page and you want to go back and look through it, it's called When Yahweh / Yah, as some people refer to him, became God. Now, and I said, yes, it's in the Bible. The topic and the title alone will draw attention because people are like, when Yahweh became God, I thought both of them were the same. But before I get to explaining this, and before I get back to why I'm getting back to this video, I have to point out that this page, I keep saying page because I think I'm on Facebook, but this YouTube channel has gone through an evolution. When I first started out, I was just talking about any old thing. But it happened to be that I started the page when there was a lot of questions on social media, at least the social media pages I'm a part of, and my Facebook page about Hebrew Israelites. And when I started, it was the hot topic at the time, so I was just putting up a bunch of videos about the Hebrew Israelites. If you don't know who they are or what they're all about, you can go through and look through some of my older videos. So I did put up quite a bit of videos about that. But somewhere along the line, I also realized that there were going to be people who were going to question me about my faith or lack thereof, or what do I believe and why don't I believe what they believe, and so forth. So this video that I did was a result of it. When Yahweh became God, again, done on March 9, 2018. I'm too lazy right now to start putting up links in the description and all that good stuff, or putting a link up there so you can link to it. But you can just go through my page and just find that video on March 9, 2018, titled When Yahweh or Yah Became God. So I had the video up. I just put it up, wasn't thinking much of it. And since that time, I decided I'm going to go ahead and change the focus of my page, and change it to something about the Caribbean, because that's where I'm from, and that's what the direction that I want the page to go in. And I have a serious passion about the region of the world I come from, which happens to be the Caribbean. And as you can see, West Indies. You can see I have all the flags of the various countries and so forth on here from the Caribbean. So I have a passion for that. But I saw that this video was getting the most comments, I saw that it was getting the most views. It's almost at 20,000 views, which I never thought I would see anything like that. 576 comments. And I noticed that a lot of people were either confused, abhorred, like this guy is just teaching blasphemy. Some people misunderstanding what I was saying. But there were other people who were like, yes, I like what you put up. This is true. Or I've been thinking about this. And they pushed me to say, hey, do a follow-up, you know? And I've been dragging my feet, but then again, I've been pretty busy. So here is the follow-up. I'm doing this strictly off the cuff. I didn't plan for this. It's just because I was able to put my son down for a rest. I said, you know what? Let me jump and try to see if I can get this video in right now. So this is somewhat of a follow-up. So I don't have anything planned out or anything like that. So I'm just going to be talking off the top of my head as I generally do with most of my videos. So in this video, if I can just recap, I pointed out that the biblical God that we read about in the Bible, he was not always, you see, today, in today's world, a lot of people are looking at it at a finished product. By the time the Bible was compiled and put together, people were looking at a finished product. This is the God of the universe. This is the one true and living God. This is the only God there is. So it's a foregone conclusion in a lot of Christian circles that that is who the biblical God is. It's just, hey, he's who created everything and whatever. My point, or the point of the video, was to show that it was not always like that. It was not always that way. That the biblical God was actually one of many gods in the ancient world, in that part of the world. He was one of many gods. And over time, as theology evolved amongst the Jews, or the Israelites, the Jews later on, as it evolved, their God, in their theology, mind you, this doesn't mean it's a reality, but in their theology, in their myths, in their mythos, just like the Greeks had theirs, the Egyptians had theirs, doesn't mean that it was necessarily real. That's just their myths of how they believed the world came to be, or how they operated in the world based on the various gods that they had. Well, the Jews also had theirs. So in their theology, their God emerged from the group of gods in that ancient world to, in their belief system, to he's the greatest of all the gods, he's the best of all the gods, to, hey, he's the only God and all these others are fake, they don't exist. Okay? That was the basis of what I was so I was trying to give a, maybe I guess you can look at it this way, I was trying to give a history of the biblical God, if I can say that. So I gave the story about the burning bush and how Yahweh met Moses at the burning bush. And it's almost as if he was making an introduction in the Bible. Now, the way the writers wrote it, it's as if that God was the biblical God was always there, going back from the beginning of creation. And that it just led all the way up in a normal progression. And that was the same God who was the one who met Moses at the burning bush. But then I found a curiosity that he shows up and he basically is telling Moses, hey, he's making an introduction. This is who I am. Go and tell your people, this is who I am. They didn't know me. Their forefathers didn't know me by this particular name. So I'm giving you a new name, and I want you to go down and tell Pharaoh and tell the people who I am. I always found that kind of curious, like, why is he making this introduction if he was always known, if he was always there? Why is he coming with this new name, this new brand? What is that all about? So in that video, I went ahead and I mentioned Deuteronomy chapter 28, I believe, verses 7 through 9. I think that's what it is. I think it's Deuteronomy chapter 28. I think it's either Deuteronomy chapter 28, 7 to 9, or Deuteronomy chapter 32, 7 to 9. I'm not looking at it. I'm just speaking off the cuff, as I said. And there, Moses is giving his farewell speech to all the people. He gathers them around and says, come. And as he's talking to this new generation of Israelites who are about to go over into the promised land, Because as the Bible says, Moses and his generation were not going to go over because of all the nonsense that took place in the wilderness. Again, this is according to the Bible, not according to me, according to the Bible. And I'm not saying that's an authority, mind you, but I'm just simply just telling you according to the myth that's in the Bible as the Jews are retelling their story, which I'm going to get to that in a minute. Moses supposedly calls the people together and tells them, tell the young people, hey, listen, get to your elders, ask your elders how our God became our God, how Yahweh became our God. So again, it fits into the narrative of that ancient world, where in the ancient world, in that part of the world, they believed that individual gods ruled over individual nations or tribes of people. So the Israelites believed they had their God, Yahweh. The Moabites had their God. The Ammonites had their God. The Canaanites had their gods or their supreme God, and so forth. That was just the way the world was back then. Each place believed that they had their own gods. What made Israel unique is that according to their covenant, they were supposed to wean themselves off of all other gods. Don't mess with the other gods. Just mess with our God, Yahweh. That's the only God we are to worship or honor. All the other gods, they exist. That's what the belief was. We believe they exist. But our allegiance is not to them. And that was always the fight that was going on in the early Old Testament. It wasn't that they didn't believe that there were other gods. They believed that other gods ruled over various nations. That's what a lot of people don't get, but it's right there. They believed that other gods ruled over other nations, but their allegiance was only supposed to be to Yahweh. And it's right there in the very first commandment. You should have no other gods but me. They exist, but you're not supposed to worship them. You're not supposed to go ahead and honor them. Just worship me. That's how it was written. Now, there's some underlying political and religious reasons for that, which I can venture to say. And I would believe this is what it is. When you have people worshiping a whole bunch of different gods, and you're looking, especially with the Jews in those days, they were supposed to be like a small group of people, and you're trying to establish yourself. You need unity. So you can't have Bob and his family over here worshiping some other god, and Susie and her family over there worshiping some other god, and Nehemiah and somebody over there worshiping some other god. You want to bring all the people to a central focus, a central god, a central temple that they can worship at. So what this means is that whenever the money or whatever is coming in, everything is going into a central location. Politically, it made a lot of sense. It's like here in the United States, where we have this flag and we're under this one flag, and whenever there's a war, we rally around this one flag. Now imagine if you had everybody in here with their own flag doing their own thing and whatever the case, you would never have that kind of unity. So in that ancient world, it did make political and religious sense. But there was always a struggle with the religious hierarchy trying to get all of the people under this umbrella. But of course, it was fronted as God said, God up there said, you better worship me alone. When I would say that was not the reality, like God didn't tell them anything. Now, of course, I know you're religious folks and the Christians are going to jump all over me, but no, I don't believe he spoke to anybody and told anybody anything. It's just that the religious groups happen to realize if we go along with this to try to get everybody to have a central focus, let's build one temple. There's one God, one main temple. Have everyone focus here. Then we can create that unity around and rally around one God. And of course, when you have that, you have a stronger nation. You have a stronger foundation instead of everybody doing their own little thing. But the other thing that I pointed out in this video, which a lot of people don't understand or a lot of people don't know, even me, when I was a Christian, I believed that the Bible was written like in real time. I thought like, as Moses was walking around, he had a scribe behind him and like, okay, well in today's events, this is what happened. And it became our Bible. Or Abraham was walking around and somebody was like, yeah, okay, this is what happened. And it just went into our Bibles. No. What happened, and most scholars can tell you this, most scholars who are on the academic side. I'm not just talking about people who are into faith, but people who actually sit down and study this kind of stuff for a living. They will tell you that the Bible was written long after the facts that they describe or that they speak about. And why did it come about that way? Well, the Jews themselves found themselves in Babylonian captivity around the 500s, the late 500s BCE. This is a fact. So once they found themselves in captivity, remember in that ancient world, different people believed in different gods, or different nations believed that they had a supreme God over them. They believe that their gods went out ahead of them in wars. So when the king got an itch to go fight or to conquer or whatever, he took off, he went out, the people followed behind that king. We still do it today, basically, in a sense, where you hear the president of the United States is the commander-in-chief. And in ancient times, and not too long ago, if you were president or if you were trying to become president or whatever, you were generally a war hero. And people followed behind you because they saw a sign of strength. Well, in the ancient world, it was somewhat similar. So when the king would go out to war and the armies would go out to war, people believed that the head god, whatever god that you worship, your supreme deity, whether it's Molech or whether it's Tammuz or whoever, you went out into battle with your god ahead of you. This is what they believe. Of course, there was no gods out there, but that's what they believe. And they went out to fight. Well, the Jews were no different. They believed their God was Yahweh. It came to a point where in their evolution, they believed that their God was worth a salt. So next thing you know, the Babylonians come down and they conquer their kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, and take them into captivity. So of course, the Jewish people are like, wait, that means the Babylonian God or gods defeated our God, right? That's what happened, because if we lost, that means our God wasn't worth the salt. But here's where the clever part came up. Their religious leaders were like, no. We got to rethink this whole process. What happened here? So you read in the Bible, in the book of Psalms, by the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down, and yea, we wept, as we remember Zion. So the Jews are sitting there despondent and like wondering what in the world happened to us. How come we lost? I thought we had the best God going. What's going on? What did we do wrong? I thought we had like the biggest, baddest God on the block. But look where we're at. We're in captivity under the Babylonians. Their religious leaders came with this clever part. And this is how it spreads out in the Bible. You guys are here in captivity, not because our God is weak, not because our God is not strong and could not deliver us. It's because of you guys not following his precepts. So the religious groups, or the religious, because Israel, ancient Israel, Judah, they had different rival sects that were vying for the people's attention. There was a cult of Baal, B-A-A-L, and then you have the Yahweh cult on this side, and in other places you had the El cult, E-L, and they're all vying for the people's attention. The Yahwehists, as you would call them, those who were pushing for Yahweh to be the God, this was their opportunity to shine. You guys are in captivity. We are in captivity because we did not follow the covenant. We did not follow the ways of Yahweh. We rebelled, we kicked, and we didn't want to serve him and do it. We want to follow all the newfangled gods out there with the other nations. That's what we wanted to do. And because of that, he punished us by allowing us to go into captivity. And this is where we are right now. And in order for us to get out of the mess that we're in, we need to go ahead and make a wholesale change and a wholesale repentance and come back to his ways. Bingo. What you have at this point now, you have a captive population who now feel that they're in the situation that they're in because they did not follow the ways of their God. And this is when, a lot of scholars will tell you this, when the Jewish population rose to what we call monotheism. Before, it was kind of what they call henotheism. Yeah, we believe other gods exist, but our God is the one God that we should be worshiping. That's kind of henotheism, as it's called. Well, they went from henotheism to monotheism, to where it's like, wait a minute, Our God is the only true God. He is who manipulated all these events to teach us a lesson. These other gods don't exist. They don't exist. Those Babylonian gods don't exist. Because if they did, and they believed that they existed, then there's a fact here that their gods beat our God. Our God really isn't all of that. So one clever way to get rid of that, these gods don't exist. Don't even give them any kind of recognition. They don't exist. They're just of gold and silver and wood and stone and whatever. Our God is the only God, and He is the supreme God, and He controls everything and everything that happens in the world today. That's how they did it back then. And this is how it's written out in the Bible. So by the time you jump over into the New Testament, or just in the late Old Testament or middle of the Old Testament, going over into the New Testament, it's a foregone conclusion by that time in Jewish culture that there's only one God, their God. But in the early part of the Old Testament, you see that evolution where it's like Yahweh is just a God amongst others, and He calls us to be His own, like jealous, like, no, you're mine. Don't serve those other gods. They exist, but don't serve them. You are mine. So when Moses called the people together, he said, look, ask your elders how Yahweh became our God. And he goes on in that same chapter, Deuteronomy chapter 28, I hope it's chapter 28, verse 8 and 9, where he goes and he says, when the Most High divided the nations, Israel fell, or Israel ended up as Yahweh's or the Lord's possession. And I explained the verse would not make any sense like how the King James has it, because of course when these editors wrote it much later on, they were monotheists at the time, and it's like, how are we going to fix this little problem? And how it's written, they wrote it where it's very confusing. The Most High divided the nations, and then Israel fell to the Most High, or Israel became the inheritance of the Most High. That makes no sense. You don't inherit something from yourself. So it makes it sound as though the Most High is dividing the nations, and then He inherits Israel. It makes no sense. But if you read it carefully, it's basically saying the Most High, a different entity from the Lord, which is Yahweh, the Most High divided the nations, and the Lord received Israel as His inheritance. And it's consistent with the belief of that day, apart from the Bible. But when academic scholars go back and look into this, the belief was there was a supreme deity who had 70 sons. And when the nations, He divided all the nations of that ancient world and their belief system and whatever, He divided them, and He parceled out the individual nations, 70 nations, the Bible even has that, 70 nations, and He parceled them out to His 70 sons. All right, it's like, hey, the Babylonians, you're going to get Marduk. The Egyptians, you're going to get this one. And Israel happened to end up with the Lord. The Lord in that verse is a separate entity from the Most High. And that would make sense. Hey, the Most High dividing nations, Israel, that's your inheritance. That's who you're gonna control. That's who you're gonna rule over. That's gonna be your nation that you have to monitor. You also go to the book of Psalms where Yahweh stands up in the council of the gods. Again, notice that. He's gods. People are like, what gods are you talking about? In the book of Psalm, forgot the chapter. Wow. I think it's chapter 91 or chapter 89, somewhere around there. I don't remember. But He stands up in the council of the gods. That means here's Yahweh standing up, and there are other gods at this round table. Again, this isn't a fantasy world. This doesn't exist. Didn't exist. This is just a writer with creative imagination. And Yahweh stands up, and Yahweh is talking as He takes over the council. So I could see Elyon, or the Most High, sitting there. And Yahweh stands up and He just starts pointing His fingers to His peers. You guys are not doing your job. You guys are not taking care of the nations like you're supposed to, the nations that you're in charge of. You guys did not do whatever you do. And you know what? I'm going to curse all of you. I'm going to curse all of you because you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And it's kind of like at that point in the evolution, the religious evolution of the Jews, it's when Yahweh rose and took over the council, basically demoting the other gods, and says, if you read it, the verse, the chapter, he says, I'm going to demote you. You're going to be just like mortal men. Because remember, the difference between the gods and men was their immortality. And it's almost as if Yahweh is saying, I'm going to strip that away from you. I'm going to take it away from you because you guys were not doing what you were supposed to do. You guys were failing the nations you were ruling over. Me, on the other hand, I was doing what I was supposed to do with Israel. And it's that point, Yahweh's ascendancy goes up to the point where he then becomes the only God, the only true and living God, the only God that there is. So again, by the time you get to the Middle Old Testament, by the time you get to the New Testament, it's a foregone conclusion that there's only one God, the God of Israel. End of story. So by the time it came down to Christians today, they're following that later evolution, that later part of the evolution, that there's only one true and living God. So it gets a little confusing or a little bit muddied when you go back to the early Old Testament and kind of realize that there are different gods being mentioned and so forth. Now, some will jump all over me and say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Oh my God, you whatever. I'll give you an example. In the book of Judges, if you have your Bible, and you go to chapter 11, there's a dispute going on. And in that dispute that is going on, Jephthah, who is the judge, I guess you can say like a governor at the time, of Israel, there's a skirmish going on, and there's a problem going on where there's a dispute over land between the Israelites and the Ammonites. There might be some confusion here because it could be the Ammonites, but I think they were also associated with the Moabites. The dispute was over land. So to avoid war, Jephthah sends down a group of people to the king of Ammon to basically go ahead and plead the case so that they won't have any war. So when the delegation that Jephthah sent down, now these are Israelites, they get down there and they start speaking to the king of Ammon and saying, hey, listen, man, check this out. These are the words. He says, now since the Lord, or I should say, this is a delegation speaking to the king of Ammon to again to settle a dispute. It says, now since the Lord, this is Judges chapter 11, verse 23. He says, now since the Lord, the God of Israel, has driven the Amorites out before his people Israel, what right have you to take it over? Will you, talking to the Ammonites, will you not take what your God Chemosh, or Chemosh, however you want to pronounce that, gives you? Notice what they're saying. Your God has a certain land possession over there. Go and possess it. That's your God who gave you that land. Your God gave you that land. He didn't say, well, our God, the God of Israel, the only true God, gave you that land. He said, no. That's the land that was allocated to your God. You possess that. Then they go on to say, will you not take what your God Chemosh gives you? Then he goes on, then the delegation goes on to say, likewise, whatever the Lord our God has given us, we will possess. You notice the distinction. Ammonites or Amorites, we recognize the fact that you guys have your own land over there. And your God gave you that land. Your God Chemosh gave you that land. Likewise, our God gave us this land over here. If the Israelites believed that their God was the only God, there would not be any distinction between your God gave you that and our God gave us this. It would have been like, our God rules everything. So we're taking over because he told us to go take this land over here. It's right there. It's right there. This is in the early parts of the Old Testament. By the time we get to the later Old Testament and into the New Testament, this would not have been a discussion. It would have been, well, our God did this and our God did that and God did this. Today, Christians speak that way. They don't sit around and say, well, yeah, you know what? there's a God over there doing this and whatever, and our God. No, they believe that their God is who controls everything. Their God created everything. Their God manipulates everything. Their God orders everything. And another way you can tell, I gotta look at this message. Someone sent me a message. I'm gonna try to bring this video to an end real soon. But another thing that you can tell also, when you go to the book of Daniel, later in the Old Testament, you read where Daniel is praying. And at that time, the Jews had gotten to the point where they were going through this evolution. So now it's no longer gods, it's now princes. And later on, angels. But Daniel is praying, and his prayer doesn't go through, and there is a mention of the prince of Persia. And then later on, you read about Michael. And Michael is like the protector of Israel, and then there's a prince of Persia. So Michael is the prince of Israel, and then it's a prince of Persia, which goes ahead to tell you again, here we have this evolution. In the Old Testament, there were gods, but now there's a prince of Persia. There is a God, there is a divine being who rules over Persia, and Michael rules over us. Now, of course, this was all refined later on, and then it became our God is the only God, and so forth. But this is what I want to basically touch on. So some people were misunderstanding what I was saying, thinking I was just being blasphemous. I'm sure there are people like, oh, you don't understand the ways of God because you're not a Christian, and so forth. And I keep mentioning to people I was a Christian for years, for a couple of decades actually. I used to always see these things, but it was like, your biases were like, no, I can't believe that. I can't believe that. I believe there's only one true and living God. Well, I don't no longer have those restrictions hold me back to be that bias. I could see it for what it really is worth at this moment. So I may have left out a whole lot of things, and of course that text just kind of like distracted me. I may have left out a whole lot of things, but this is the gist of what I was getting at and what the follow-up was going to be. Now there's more that I could go ahead and say about this, but I'm not saying this type of stuff because I want to cause people to lose their faith or anything like that. The Bible is still fascinating to me, because I am a history buff, and the Bible does have a place in history and helps to explain an ancient world, the way that the ancient mind, of course, in that region of the world, how they thought and how they look at things. Because some of what they did, what they put together, what they believe, still trickles all the way down to our day and age right now, and still affects people in their religious beliefs, how they look at the world, how they think of things. So these ancient beliefs are still affecting the world today in certain parts, certain people's minds. So it is relevant. So I just wanted to follow up and just try to put this together to try to see if I can get people to better understand what I was trying to say initially. I hope you understand also what I was trying to get at. Now, I'm sure there were some other thoughts that I had in mind that I'm just not using right now or thinking too much about, but I hope this was enough to help you guys to more or less understand or get a better understanding. And if you don't, you can put it down in the comment section. Now, I did not respond to a lot of people because so many people respond. I used to always say to myself that I always respond to people in the comment section. I was like, wow, this is a lot of people to respond to. But hopefully, I followed up with this and I put this in here for you guys to get a better understanding of what I was talking about. Didn't want it to be this long, but I hope you guys stuck with me all the way to the end. And I thank you so much, okay? So unless you guys are clamoring for another follow-up on this follow-up, I probably just leave this one alone so I can get back to the focus of what this YouTube channel is all about. So you guys take care, and I will talk to you or see you guys in the next video. You guys take care. Thank you for tuning in here to Caribbeanology.